So how are we partnershiping? We partner with community, we partner with families, we partner with intercrossing departments, we provide support resources. So I'm not sure, like I'd really have to think about what we would highlight, where it would be real clear how that steps forward to student success. But just it's extremely general, and I know what vision statements are that way. So I was just putting out there, would we want to add like a detail of how we do that?
Or some what I call actionable words, like engage, empower, build, support. So I know a mission statement usually has the how, but if we might want to craft a couple of actionable words, but not to make it too long. The other thing I would think about is, as I thought about the vision statement previously, will everyone understand inside? What does inside mean? Does it mean?
Yes, that was the thing that was holding me up, Dr. Brim. I don't know what it exactly is. Families inside the classroom? That actually sounds scary.
Yeah. So we might want to look at another term or word for inside to be more clear on actually what did we mean.
And also what Tracy said, the by doing what. And again, not too many words.
So like district, inside meaning our district departments, our agency partners, our administrators, teachers.
Well,
yeah,
I took that more as like the, with the more localized, the teacher, the teacher.
In the school.
Yeah,
okay.
In the class, like inside the classroom, that direct contact between the teacher and the child and the families, which I think is what we're talking about here in general, is that there's more direct communication.
If I may, I know Dr. Brim, over the years, I've used the family the strategic partnership rubric that you had on your website. And it was really amazing showing what that really good, solid teacher engagement with families look like. I don't know if you all still use that rubric. Do you know what I'm referring to?
Yes, it is a classroom rubric of engagement. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering if that would be a reference to maybe even look at for something like this.
Sheila, as you're nodding, is that something you can drop in the chat box we could all have access
sure.
to?
It's the Flamboyant Classroom Family Engagement Rubric, right? Yeah. Okay, yes. Yeah, I'll do that right now.
So I thought that was extremely good tool.
Connie, I think as you were talking, Dr. Pelosi, that it is really about this idea. So often I think that the belief is we have to get families to understand what's going on in the classroom and be ready to the classroom. But what we really want is the goal is not to get them into the classroom, it's to get them to support what's going on in the classroom at home. And so that phrase of inside and beyond, I think, was trying to get at connecting to what kids are learning, but supporting it outside of the classroom. And I'm not sure how you say that in a few words. And it was very interesting to me how the three people who talked about this read that phrase differently, or what inside meant. And so being more specific is probably an important thing to be.
Well, even if we started the by, we're all educators and families partner by what are these things that we're going to have them do? Those actionable items that Dr. Brim was thinking of.
So by collaborating, I mean, when you partner, you collaborate.
Yes, collaborating, I think, is definitely one of the words we should use. But then there's also dialoguing. It's more,
Yes.
more immediate kind of communication,
Engagement,
engagement.
engage.
I guess we should step back and say, what do we really, what actually are we asking? That
Good question. So what would you be asking if you were that building leader?
If you all look what Lucy has written, she says Pinellas County Schools is a place that empowers educators and families to partner as advocates for student 100% success. So she's kind of added a little more substance to that.
Just brainstorming. It didn't come out. The last part didn't come out as I thought with my fingers didn't connect to my brain. Sorry. But I don't know that it's necessary to say inside and beyond the classroom, because I think we should just make that assumption if we're going to have them partner.
I like partnering as advocates. I really like that.
So advocates for one another, because I kind of like educators and families partner, take out inside and beyond the classroom to ensure 100% student success by community engagement. You know, you could put any of those, empowering, because to me, it sounds more like then the educators and the families are, you know, working together, which is our whole goal to begin with for that 100% student success, right?
One thing I was thinking about is home, when we talk about communication and families have concerns about that's home to school, home. So that loop of home school connection. I don't know if.
Yeah, I like that loop.
I'm going to throw out, I borrowed this from adapt this from another district. I'm going to throw this out as a sample. I'll put in the chat box here to kind of get at what Dr. Close was saying about inside and outside the classroom. So this is going a different direction now, just to see what you all think about this. Should say a place where high quality, not, I left out a word, sorry.
Well, that addresses what we're talking about, some specifics, high quality instruction combined with support for learning at home, to Tracy's first point. I like that.
The idea, I think, is that the success is two parts. We will guarantee you get really good classroom instruction. We're not asking parents to do that, but we're asking parents to do things at home that support or dovetail with that high quality instruction so that everybody succeeds.
I'd like to see something about the partnering. It does to me that.
And I know it needs partnering a lot, but like joining together to build.
Something.
Pinellas County Schools is a place where high quality classroom instruction.
So I think the way this is hitting me with the high quality classroom instruction, it seems like we're kind of stepping off of our lane, because what our lane is that collaboration, is that engagement, is that partnership. I mean, that's the lane we're in right now. And, yes, we want high quality instruction, but the process is to do somebody else's lane.
Yeah, I agree, because if you look at we won't be measuring the high quality classroom instruction. We will really be focusing on how that partnership is benefiting student achievement, but in a collaborative manner. But it is the engagement piece we will be honing in. Although we understand that engagement is an instructional strategy, but not necessarily that needs to be in our vision.
I think we should go back and take a look at Lucy's submission. I think she's cool. And the reason I like that we're empowering educators and families is because I think that that suggests our role as leadership and at the district to do something that sets this up to happen. It's like we're making a condition that will allow this to happen. So I see that as our leadership role here.
I'm wondering what some of the others, I'm watching your face, Dan, as you are watching the screen, and just wondering what's going on in your head. I see the wheels turning, but I'm just curious.
I like lots of places it's going. I like the original vision statement. I didn't find as much dissonance around it as others did, so I'm good with it. And I like Lucy's version of that. I do like these two, the original and Lucy's version, better than the one that mentions instruction per the comments from the rest of the group. The only thing I'm really thinking that is missing in Lucy's is, I think if I were picking it, it wouldn't be just advocating. I know we talk a lot about that, but advocating means that I know where to turn,
Right.
get information and all that, which is a big part of why I know what Dr. Brim and the team and Lucy obviously would want parents to be able to do, but we want them to do more than advocate. I think we want them to actually impact learning by some other things that they're doing. So, I mean, I think we want parents to be getting kids ready for school and to be doing some home learning and checking up on grades. And so it's advocating and something. I think advocating is only one part of it. And that's where I like that.
So as, when I was watching your face, I was thinking about this from a data, how would you quantify some of this? And where you were going with that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm wondering if you simply remove as advocates and just say to partner for 100% student success, that allows the full range of how you would define all those things you described. Partnering means getting ready for school, doing this, doing that. It seems like that is this, it doesn't pin you down to one strategy or one area. And maybe that goes too broad.
One more thing I'll add is that I think back to the instruction thing, some folks had a struggle with that. I agree. I don't think it's about instruction, but I do think it's about learning. So ultimately, if we do all this, the student should learn, be more learned as a result of it. Learning should occur. And so to ensure the student learns is, I think, ultimately what we're after, which might be embedded into success. So
getting the word learning in there would be
lifelong learners to be, 100%. I like the lifelong because this doesn't end when they graduate.
And the student 100% success, that's from your blueprint or strategic plan or whatever that document is that that's a phrase. Is that a phrase you use a lot throughout the district? An anchor phrase that is
I feel like I see it everywhere, but
Yeah.
because you could pull out 100% success and put in some statement about learning.
Could it be increased student engagement?
So I'm hearing the word learning should appear somewhere, a little more specificity on the how, or the way to get there. And I think what we can do is, Sheila, do you feel like you have enough thoughts here to make? I just lost you there. Another stab at honing
Yes.
some of these ideas.
Yes, yeah, we can definitely, I do. I
Any
think,
other key thoughts about what struck me at the beginning was reading the statement, three people, three slightly different interpretations, and how to reduce the variation in how it's interpreted. And I'm hearing using learning, being specific about some methods or some actionable words. Anything else to consider as we?
I know in the chat, Dr. Brinson put down inserting equity. Could you elaborate on that? How would you like that to be used in that vision statement?
Well, I just think that when you're looking at trying to cover everything to make sure the child is successful, the word equity does just that. Because whatever the child needs, it's our responsibility along with the community and the family to provide it, because it varies. So you don't want to get caught into, one word, many words, trying to make sure you don't leave anything out. I just think that providing every child with an equitable education opportunity to be successful should find its place in its mission statement, especially now with all the work that we have going on with equity training and the importance of equity in our work. So I don't know exactly where, but I just think that it's one of those buzzwords that needs to be inserted.
Great. Okay. All right. Any other last minute thoughts before we move on to picking your brain some more on the broader policy?
I have
Jennifer
one,
has
and
it, yes.
it's totally just a thought to throw out there because I'm not sure if it would sound right without it. But I don't even know if unique is a place that. Just a thought.
Move is a place. Got it. Okay. And I guess we are thinking of this vision statement. Dr. Brim is thinking of this vision statement as what we see at the end of the tunnel. What's there? What's the light down there? What does it look like when we're there? Ooh, impact equitable learning outcomes. I got to copy this. It's in the notes.
Do we want to stick with 100% success? I know that's our goal, but
that would be a question I would ask you as PCS employees. Is that phrase meaningful, that it's really important to have there because it's in so many other things, or is it necessary? It's a really good question.
Yeah, someone else stated that earlier, that they don't think that might not be necessary for the vision statement. So we could look at that.
Well, I think Dan has given us a potential way to say the same thing, include, the learning, including the equity to impact equitable learning outcomes. Because that's really what we're trying to get at, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that. We're going to make another go around. We'll send it out. This process that we're starting on is really this being clear, being specific, being not being nebulous is really what we want to talk about when it comes to the policy. So in the chat box, I'm going to drop in a copy of, now I've just lost it. Give me 1 second while I move back to this. So these are the family engagement policies. You know what, Sheila? I don't think I'm able to drop it in.
I think are you talking about our family engagement policies? Because you put them in at the beginning and there you did it
I
again.
added the first 2 pages that were missing. So
okay.
As Dr. Brim talked about this, we we want to make the policy around family engagement something that is a living, breathing, meaningful, useful policy, not something that pretty much no one has read and it says things that never get done. So what I'm going to ask folks to do, so Sheila's going to stop sharing the screen and we're all just going to be able to look at each other here. My first question for you is, as you think about your work in the district, in any role that you've been in, is there, I'd like you to use the chat box or unmute, and you, as you can tell, I'm not afraid to call on anybody. Is there a policy that you find exceptionally useful or that you use frequently? Is there a policy that you're intimately familiar with, you use, it is a living thing? And if you could just tell me what, just use the chat box also, what is the policy you, if there is one, and there may not be one. So let me say, nope, no real policy jumps out in mind, or yes, it is the blank policy that just, it's something that's really a part of my life and it is a useful thing. So I see Jennifer.
One of the policies we use.
Can't hear you.
You muted yourself, Dr. Brim.
I'm sorry, the volunteer policy.
Okay, so
And the background clearance. So we use that a lot as we address issues with volunteers that have not met our guidelines or criteria.
We're going to come back to that because I'm going to ask you specifically why it's so useful. What are there other policies that you have found are really, really well done and useful and make your job clearer?
Well, I think the Title I, I'm just looking at my title, the Title I lens, it does need to be revised because this was from 2009, but these are things that are, you know, we're trying to get beyond compliance, but these are compliance pieces that schools have to address when they're developing their parent plans. And we really do look at barriers and how do we, and so it's like flexible meetings and, you know, utilizing cross coordination within departments. All these things are policy, but we do them. Our district does do them. It's nice to call them out because sometimes they don't even realize they're doing them.
Other policies, you know,
In my previous role, the policy centered around the behavior of employees, instructional employees, support employees, that policy, and some of the policies around consequences of behavior.
There's also the parent communication and engagement expectations, right, in our Code of Student Conduct book. I always refer to those policies.
So tell me a little bit more about that. It is.
So there's the effective ongoing two-way communication guidelines, what it looks like, expectation for two-way communication.
So is that actually in policy or is that in a document that?
So it's the expectation. So to me, it's clearly defined. It's on in our student code of conduct under what the district is saying communication engagement for families and staff should look like. How they should be getting information out to the families, what their, you know, climate should look like, what teachers need to do to keep their records updated and be communicating with families about struggling students. I mean, it's very specific. Okay. It's on page 21 of and 22 of our 2021 Code of Student Conduct.
So what I'm hearing is when Dr. Rim, you gave your example, and when you just gave your example, Tracy, and I'm thinking, Amy, it's the same thing. What I'm hearing is where there are specifics that say, this is acceptable, this is not, do this, don't do that. Where there is clarity around, it's not gray, it's very clear. That makes it useful. I heard you say, Tracy, I look at that all the time. And Dr. Brim, when you were discussing the expectation of employees, what I saw in my head was, sorting out when you're having a conversation with employee, this is okay, this is not okay, here's why this is okay, this is allowable, that is not allowable, and parsing that out. Referring back to something that has enough detail that you can have a clear conversation about it. As you think about, what was the other one that I saw? So the volunteer policy was another one. Talk to me a little bit about that volunteer policy. Why is it helpful?
The area that I had to use the volunteer policy around is when we revised the policy as to who was eligible to be a volunteer based on their criminal history. So that is one key piece. The other piece is that
So it doesn't say we will consider whether you're eligible or not. It says specifically.
no, there are detailed criteria. And then the piece of what is a level 2 or level 1 clearance, which is very clear. And when do you need a level 2 clearance? So there are a lot of things that, as you said, detail, but it's a living document that we use daily to ensure we're following those policy guidelines.
So I've heard several of you say the more detailed, the clearer, the easier it is to use. And our question is, as we look at, as we embark on this process, as you embark on this process of cleaning up the family engagement policies, of adjusting them, what should we keep in mind as we start this process? Because we're going to come to you and ask for feedback and input like we did on the vision statement. Beyond being, as Dr. Bill was describing and Tracy was describing, being specific, having real clarity, this is okay, this is not. Are there other things when you think about policy in your life that makes it easy for you to use the policy to guide your work?
For me, I had put in the chat that we, a couple of years ago, revised the policy regarding communication from outside organizations to our families. And it came to our department because we had employed an outside organization, Peach Jar, to manage our e-flyer distribution. And we wanted it to be very clear from outside the school and the district, what flyers, what kind of information are we saying is okay to use this Peach Jar e-flyer system for? So what access are we giving, outside organizations to our families? And it led to a very rich, deep, detailed discussion about what is it? What are we saying is okay? And now we have 3 very specific, I think, guidelines, and we use them twice a week or so when we approve the flyers that community organizations upload to Peach Jar. We look or, no, does this meet one of our guidelines? Yes, no.
Okay. Guidelines that are actually included in the policy, or a guideline is a separate tool that is available to help you use the policy?
It's in the policy.
They're included in the policy. Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't, to be alive and, live beyond Peach Jar, because it doesn't, who's to say we're going to use Peach Jar or use an e-flyer system? It just talks about access to families, what advertising, what is advertising, that kind of stuff.
So to speak to your issue of practices and guidelines, as we looked at like the code of conduct, Lori Dart has always said we could have practices and guidelines and procedures that we followed for years that is a leverage for us to stand on if we have to do some mitigating circumstances of someone coming against, but not necessarily their policy. So I think.
Let me see if I can repeat that. It is
okay.
one
there
way.
are guidelines, there are there are practices, there are like the code of conduct that are not necessarily, but they're procedural practices where some things are in our policy. And so we have to really, as we move forward in engagement, to rewrite them as a policy, although we still will have practices and procedures.
So is that the common way of doing this throughout the district and your other parts of the administration? Do you have regulations? Do you have procedural guides? Is that a common way of organizing your work? And you do that as a way of helping interpret the policy? Dan is shaking his head no.
Well, I'm sorry. I didn't know you saw me. I apologize.
Yes, I watch it. I'm a parent. I watch everything.
I want to say one thing, and I did take a call. I apologize. I'm doing my best to stay tuned in, but I had to take a call. I think I don't know. I haven't looked at any of the family engagement policies, but the policies. When I hear the word policy, I think of legal policies, right? Like I deal with the student privacy policies, and I heard some of that with Dr. Bremen, as Kane was mentioning, like we certainly don't want flyers going out from agencies that haven't been approved. So I think that's where policies come into play. Everything else, what we hear is best practice or guidelines, which I would just argue that for the most part, I think in my work in the district, I haven't used policy to drive my work as much as whatever you might call guidelines or best practice. And I would separate those two. And the only other thing I want to bring up to Dr. Brim or to the larger group is if what we're after is something that fits the vision statement, then maybe what we're lacking is whether they're policies or they're guidelines that say, how do we empower and how do we create equitable outcomes? Otherwise, we will be stuck in the legalistic side of keeping kids safe, which is important, but not.
So here's an example I just pasted in the chat room from your current policy. So there are a lot of statements like this. The district will use a variety of communication tools on a regular basis to facilitate two-way interaction. So what is that? And who does it? And when does it happen? And what is sufficient? And getting it, I mean, depending on who you talk to, you could get 9 people and have 9 different definitions of saying we did this or didn't do this. And as you were just describing, Dan, is the policy about the general statement and the procedure manual or the guide, the regulations, something where you detail that?
And the other piece we have to consider as we move forward, the state we haven't really done anything with our policy, as Amy said, like since 2009. But the state has also developed, I guess, their statute, their practice, their policy as it relates, and help me out, Mrs. Kane, to engagement, that as we looked at those pieces, and there is a huge disconnect because of the length of time from what they're looking at and how our policy looks. So I think it needs to streamline from a state to a district to a action, into operational procedures.
As you look at this statement, Dan, I'm just curious, would you leave something like this in a policy and have another document help interpret what it looks like, or would you make the policy more specific? I'm thinking back to the example. Yeah, as you were describing.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think, again, I'm probably not the guy to ask about policy. I'm not a big policy kind of guy, but as a way of instituting change. But you could have policy language, Ron, I think, using your example here you posted, that says, I'm actually talking about policy, that would say something like, in protection of the equitable outcomes, right? In protection of equitable outcomes, which is Dr. Brinson's comment, that would say you must do things that ensure that you're reaching all kids and all families. because that is a legal issue. We can't
Right.
have things that, we're communicating in ways we know purposely we're leaving a group of kids out. So I think you could policy your way into expectations around equitable things. Very, very, I don't think that's going to change anybody's attitudes or work, but I think you could do that for legal reasons. And then I would probably back it up, which I'm sure Dr. Brim and her team do, with trainings about what those tools would look like, and exemplars and those sort of things. I think that's more important than the policy.
So you had the phrase you used that I thought was very helpful is if you want to institute change, which is really what we want. So I'm hearing you say policy, get the legal aspect, but use other mechanisms around as a way to say what exactly that looks like. I also think, Dr. Brinson, last time you talked about everybody should get trained. And so in the current policy, it says the district will provide staff training. So again, it's that same conversation around.
It is in our Title I policy for parent and family engagement from the state, which is, they did a little revision, and we do have guidance, but building staff capacity is a requirement from our Title I schools within parent and family engagement. So
I mean, that's the question I would ask you, Amy, and ask Dr. Brinson. So it says we will build family capacity or build teacher capacity around this, for example. Who then decides, if I'm a building principal, do I just get to say, well, I sent out a note that was sufficient, or as Dr. Brinson said last time, everybody should get trained on customer service. Do you make, if you put that in guidance, is that something you can hold buildings to if you want to institute change? And that's, I think, really what we're getting at with the policy conversation is where is the best place to put the specifics? Does that make sense?
Can I just ask a question for clarity? It's Lucy.
Hi, Lucy.
Hey, so in the thread of what your conversation is right now, would that be maybe there is no PD that adequately covers the idea of all the ways to engage parents? And maybe that's something that we in the PD department could create and support to meet any kind of, policy that we might, or guidelines that we might create together.
yes,
yes,
and
and
actually,
yes.
yes,
Right,
and I was
right.
going to say, Tony Plush from Sexton, he reached out to me and he wants to create a calendar of events. And I have not heard back from him, but I looped Sheila in on that. But I would love to loop you in on that too, because this is his vision. This is what he wants to do. And I guess that's what we're trying to get away from, is just, this is not Amy Brown's vision or Sheila Kane's vision, but this is, we have a whole district to help us. So,
and that's where I go back to, I think one of the things that resonated me the most from the last meeting was when Dr. Brinson said, every person should be trained in customer service, as an example. So as we think about instituting change around family engagement practices, we really want practices to change and improve. I guess the big question is, do we spend our time, do you do a light policy review or revision and make sure the right broad concepts are in there, but you then have these other tools and guides that help drive that? My question would be, Amy, though, as the example you gave, if it's not specifically in policy, can somebody, you just have to, is it by the power of persuasion you get it done? Is there anybody, how do you hold them accountable for saying you didn't deliver on this particular thing? What you decided to do around this isn't sufficient, doesn't meet the standard of, what we need it to be.
they're supposed to evaluate their plans year to year. So they're like, right now they're in that process of looking back in time and saying, what did we do and where did we, and it's just such an odd year anyway. So, that's going to be an interesting scenario, but they reflect and look back at their data from their parent and family engagement events to see where they need to build from. And also, how does that support their school improvement plan? And that's really that's really show me the, where's the beef, right? That's where it should be, you know, supporting the student achievement. So we have been having those conversations with schools. And I think that we hopefully will start to move the dial, that it's really a strategy. We've really embedded it with their Title I school-wide plan. It's not just a thing, that an afterthought. So the accountability piece is on them to reflect and look back and say what they did and where they're going.
I think back to Dr. Brim's example though, when she talks about the volunteers and being like, a what's in a level 2 clearance? It either is or it isn't. And it's, you know, it is a level 2, it is not. And here's the reason why, what it looks like or when you need it. The example you gave, Amy, is it possible to have that same kind of specificity saying this is, you know, they review their own plan and they decide. That's very different than having something that's measure, a standard I can hold it up to and say, you didn't get there and you need to get there.
We're working on that too. We're devising a rubric that we're going to use internally as a department, so that when we do review their plans, that we can see where we are really strong as Title I schools and where we need to build. So we have, you know, like a 3 would be just the base, you know, this is what we need to have. And then the 4 would be really pivoting and innovative. And then, you know, 1 is, we don't really see this very often at our school. You know, these events are very rare and not strategic. So we are getting there. Title I is getting there.
So can I add one thing?
Yeah.
Just so, because I have to get it out of my head and into the thing before I'll forget it. Back when we go all the way back to the vision statement and whatever, one of the things I think that I haven't heard, and it just hit me when somebody said something, is to keep parents informed. And it meant me be an easy one. But I think the action we're really talking about, and I think what parents need is information. So about their kid, I mean, about their own child.
That they understand and can use.
That's right, that they can understand and use. So when we get back to the actual vision, if we are not educating, well, if that's the word, empowering is fine, families to know about their child better, then we probably are not being successful. And I think that probably has to somehow be worked into the either vision or mission. Because and that's the lines of Dr. Mapp's work and stuff that I know.
Yes, Dr. Prince.
So here's what I would do if I was in charge. I would move from policy and look more at the strategic goals that we have as a district. And right now we have 7. And if family engagement and parental engagement and involvement is so important, then I would look at making it goal number 8. And then under that, you would have all these actionable steps, because if you look at our strategic plan, we have 7 goals. And under those 7 goals, we have actionable steps to define what is not optional when it comes to parent engagement. You may have the flexibility to do some things depending on your needs at your school and your population, but there are other things that everybody across the district will do and implement when it comes to parental involvement and engagement in order to make sure that we have some uniformity.
Dr. Brinson, I would like to speak to that. That has been an ongoing project of ours to get that into the district strategic plan. And so with that same comment that you made was presented last year, and it resulted in an actionable step under goal 7. But I think as we move collectively as a group representing the larger voices of all of our areas, that might be another area to be revisited with the strategic planners of our district. But I do want you to know that has been presented multiple times.
And
I guess you're not in charge either.
No, I'm not.
I know. So it is 11 o'clock. It's a little bit after 11. I want to respect your time. This conversation really, I think, I'm going to borrow from Dan and Dr. Brinson. So Dan said, institute change. Dr. Brinson said to articulate what is not optional and what is optional. And that's really what we're getting at here. What is the best vehicle? How do we move forward as a district to help folks understand these things are not optional? These we have some flexibility around these partnerships that help realize that vision. And policy may be the way to do part of it. Making an 8th strategic goal may be another way, but what we really want to make sure is the work happens, the change happens, and folks understand, how do you articulate what is the minimum everyone has to do? And if they do that minimum, they're in a good place. And how you get to this. So that's the conversation we want to keep alive, and what we will ask you to think on between now and next time, because that's the task. I think you articulated it very well. Any other comments or things you'd like to share before we log off today, Miss Sheila?
Oh, just that I hope you feel like this was a time well spent and a I don't know, deep, rich discussion, because I sure do. We need your input. We want your input. We are better for your input. So I even though we haven't come to, the perfect vision statement yet, and we haven't revised all 3 policies, this is what we're looking for. We can't sit here in our department and between Dr. Brim and I and Amy and, a few others, just make decisions, because that's not how it works. That's not going to make change happen. So just thank you.
And don't forget that we'll be coming back and reaching out to everybody who put their name there to help us really create those fantastic trainings for families with the reading recovery teachers. So Dr. Closey, I saw your name among there. I saw Lucy, several people saying they would help. So look for a communication. Dr. Brim, any closing words for us today?
No, I just say thank you again for all your input, and we'll continue to work toward this effort of making sure families are included.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. Take
right.
care.
Go have some cake. In fact,
Have a
everybody
great
have some
spring
cake.
break.
I got to make it to 51, Ron. I can't keep eating cake.
I like on Angela's iPhone, she was able to get a background. I don't know. I've not done that on mine. I have to learn how to do that on my iPhone. Angela, you've set a high bar for me.
You're muted.
I liked Amy Brown's. She had the beach
Yeah.
and the water.
And it actually moves.
Yes, it's beautiful.
Thank you. If I showed you the real thing, you'd be crushed where I really am sitting.
Well, I'm in a hallway at Lakewood Elementary School.
Okay.
in my little cubby office.
Oh, stop bragging. That's so glamorous.
I know. It's cute though. I love it.
Thanks for joining us today, Angela.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me. Everybody have a great spring break.
You too.
Bye-bye. We lost Dr. Brim.
Oh, so I get her back. I'll get her back.
So Ron, can you guys hear me? So I could share this rubric that we are working on if you guys are interested.
Well, so, here's the question. So if we think about this purely from the family engagement side, and I don't know how you do this in Pinellas, but it is really what Dr. Brinson said at the end. What is not optional, and what do you have to do, and how do we make the people do it? What is the vehicle for having that happen? Is it being an 8 strategic goal? Because when it says in there in the policy, for example, you will make a reasonable effort to reach out to parents. Well, that is quite a wide, a broad definition. And where are the teeth that go with that? Because we were equitable is a statement we will hear. It's like, yeah, equitable means this. And on things like the volunteer policy is a really good example. You don't want lawsuits, so they get really specific. But other policies, it's totally general. And wherever there's gray area, there is stuff does not happen. And so I see, Kyoto, you're nodding your head. I can't hear you though. Where is the place you put the teeth? And like last time, Dr. Brinson said, everybody should get this training. All right, where does that get mandated? Does it get mandated in policy?
That's what I was thinking. We can continue to talk about policy, but unfortunately, I'm of the belief that unless it's mandated, there is nothing that will consistently happen 100% across the board. And I can speak to the difference between our fundamental schools versus our traditional schools in Pinellas County. Fundamental schools, parents have to be involved. If not, your child will be kicked out of the school. So
But
generally,
who defines the involvement? Who gets to say what involved looks like? Each school does its own.
so it's according